A shot rang out in the night, shattering the stillness of granite, Colorado, as Sarah Kincaid pressed her back against the rough-hewn church wall, her breath coming in sharp, painful gasps. The year was 1878, and she had nowhere left to run. Sarah clutched her small bundle of possessions tighter to her chest as she slipped through the back door of the granite Methodist church. The wooden door creaked softly as she eased it shut behind her. In the dim moonlight filtering through the stained glass windows, the church seemed both a sanctuary and a stranger. She moved silently down the aisle, her worn boots barely making a sound on the wooden floor. The exhaustion of days on the road washed over her like a physical weight. At 22, Sarah had never imagined her life would come to this: homeless, alone, and running from a past that seemed determined to claim her. Her long auburn hair hung in tangles around her pale face, and her once fine blue dress was now travel-stained and torn at the hem. She slid into one of the back pews, arranging her shawl beneath her head as a makeshift pillow. Just for tonight, she told herself. Just one night of safety before moving on. Sleep claimed her quickly, the kind of deep, desperate slumber that comes only to the truly exhausted. Sarah didn't hear the church door open again at dawn. She didn't hear the heavy footsteps approaching, or feel the morning light as it spilled across her sleeping form. Caleb Tucker had risen before the sun, as he did every morning to tend to his cattle. At 30, he was one of the most respected ranchers in Granite, though he kept mostly to himself. His tall frame and broad shoulders spoke of years of hard work, while the lines beginning to form at the corners of his eyes hinted at both laughter and sorrow. This morning, he decided to stop by the church to drop off some repairs he'd promised Pastor James he'd make to the hymnal cabinet. He hadn't expected to find a woman asleep in the back pew, her face peaceful in slumber, despite the obvious signs of hardship in her appearance. Caleb hesitated, his hat in his hands. He could simply leave and pretend he'd seen nothing. It wasn't his business why a stranger was sleeping in the church, but something in her face, the vulnerability there, made him pause. He cleared his throat softly. Sarah's eyes flew open, wide with terror. She sat up abruptly, nearly falling off the pew in her haste to put distance between herself and the stranger. "Easy now," Caleb said, his voice gentle as though speaking to a spooked horse. "I'm not going to hurt you." Sarah scrambled to her feet, gathering her meager possessions. "I'm sorry." "I'll leave right away. I didn't steal anything, I swear." Her voice was hoarse either from disuse or fear. Caleb took a step back, giving her space. "I'm not accusing you of anything, miss. I'm just here to fix a cabinet. I'll go." Sarah's eyes darted toward the door. "Wait." Caleb raised a hand, then slowly lowered it when he saw her flinch. "It's cold out there and you look like you could use a hot meal." He paused, considering his words carefully. "I have a ranch about 2 miles from town. There's a small cabin on my property, used to belong to my foreman before he got married and moved into his own place. It's sitting empty now. You're welcome to use it, just until you get your bearings." Sarah stared at him, suspicion clear in her green eyes. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" Caleb shrugged, a small smile touching his lips. "My ma always said God puts people in our path for a reason. Maybe I'm in yours for a reason, or you're in mine." He placed his hat back on his head. "The offer stands, no strings attached. You look like you could use a friend more than judgment right now." Sarah stood frozen, her mind racing. Every instinct told her not to trust this man, not to trust anyone, but she was exhausted, hungry, and nearly out of options. "I can't pay you," she said finally. "I'm not asking for payment." "Then what are you asking for?" "Nothing," Caleb said simply. "The cabin's sitting empty anyway. Would be a shame to let it go to waste when someone needs shelter." Sarah studied him, taking in his honest face, the calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work, the kindness in his blue eyes. Against her better judgment, she nodded slowly. "Just for a few days," she said, "until I figure out what's next." Relief crossed Caleb's face. "That's fine. I was heading back after dropping these tools off. My wagon's outside if you'd like a ride." Sarah hesitated again, then nodded. What choice did she have? She followed him outside into the crisp morning air, squinting against the bright Colorado sunrise. Caleb helped her into his wagon without touching her, seeming to understand her wariness. As they set off down the dusty road leading out of town, Sarah kept her gaze fixed ahead, wondering if she'd just made the wisest decision of her life or the most foolish. The journey to Caleb's ranch passed mostly in silence. Sarah stole occasional glances at the cowboy beside her, noting the way he handled the horses with confident ease, the strong profile beneath his wide-brimmed hat. He didn't press her for information, and for that she was grateful. The landscape opened up before them, rolling hills giving way to a sprawling valley where cattle grazed. In the distance, mountains rose like sentinels against the clear blue sky. Despite her situation, Sarah couldn't help but appreciate the raw beauty of this place. "That's my place up ahead," Caleb said, breaking the silence and nodding toward a collection of buildings nestled against a backdrop of pine trees. A two-story farmhouse stood as the centerpiece, with a large barn and several outbuildings arranged around it. Smoke curled from the chimney and a small stream meandered nearby. "It's beautiful," Sarah said softly, the first genuine words she'd spoken to him. Caleb smiled, pride evident in his expression. "Been in my family for nearly 20 years. My pa built it after coming west from Pennsylvania. He passed 5 years back and my ma followed him a year later. It's just me now, though I have hands that help with the cattle." Sarah nodded, unsure what to say. Family was a complicated subject for her. As they pulled up to the main house, a border collie came bounding out to greet them, barking excitedly. "That's Dusty," Caleb explained. "Don't worry, she's all bark and no bite." The dog circled the wagon, tail wagging furiously. Sarah couldn't help but smile at the animal's enthusiasm. Caleb guided the horses past the main house toward a smaller cabin set a little apart from the other buildings. It was simple but well-maintained, with a small porch and smoke-free chimney. "This is it," he said, stopping the wagon. "It's not fancy, but it's solid. Got a bed, table, stove, and there's a pump out back for water." He hopped down and came around to offer Sarah assistance, still careful not to crowd her. This time, she accepted his outstretched hand, noting the warmth and strength in his grasp. The inside of the cabin was clean and sparse, a single room with a cast iron stove in one corner, a narrow bed along one wall, a small table with 2 chairs, and a chest of drawers. Simple, but infinitely better than a church pew or the hard ground. "I'll bring you some firewood and supplies," Caleb said, lingering at the doorway. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, comes in 3 times a week. She'll be by tomorrow. I'll ask her to bring you some fresh clothes and whatever else you might need." Sarah stood in the center of the cabin, overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, needing to understand. Caleb's expression grew thoughtful. 6 years ago, I was in a bad way after losing someone I cared about, nearly drank myself to death. A stranger pulled me out of a ditch one night, got me home, and stayed until he was sure I'd be all right. Never knew his name, never saw him again, but I promised myself I'd pass on that kindness when I could." He touched the brim of his hat. "I'll leave you to get settled. Come up to the main house for supper around 6 if you'd like. No pressure if you'd rather be alone." With that, he was gone, leaving Sarah standing in the silent cabin. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to take a deep breath. She was safe, at least for now. True to his word, Caleb returned an hour later with an armload of firewood, a basket of food, and a bucket of fresh water. He showed her how to work the stove and where everything was, then left her to rest. The bed, though narrow, felt like heaven after weeks of makeshift sleeping arrangements. Sarah sank into it gratefully, expecting to be instantly asleep. Instead, she found herself staring at the rough-hewn ceiling, her mind churning with questions. Could she trust this stranger's kindness? What would he expect in return eventually? And how long could she stay before her past caught up with her? Sleep eventually claimed her, but it was restless and filled with dreams of running. When Sarah awoke, the sunlight had shifted, indicating late afternoon. She used some of the water Caleb had brought to wash her face and attempted to bring order to her tangled hair with her fingers. Her reflection in the small mirror above the wash basin showed a face she barely recognized, thinner, with shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of more than physical exhaustion. At precisely 6 o'clock, after much internal debate, Sarah found herself walking the path to the main house. She decided that accepting a meal didn't commit her to anything, and she could always leave at first light if necessary. Caleb answered her knock immediately, as though he'd been waiting nearby. The warm scent of cooking food wafted from inside, making Sarah's stomach growl embarrassingly loud. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "Nothing fancy, but Mrs. Abernathy left a stew before she headed home." The interior of Caleb's home was surprisingly comfortable, worn but well cared for furniture, bookshelves lined with volumes, and family photographs on the walls. It wasn't the house of a bachelor who didn't care about his surroundings. It felt like a home. "Have a seat," Caleb gestured to the dining table, already set for two. "Would you like coffee or water with your meal?" "Water, please," Sarah said, sinking into one of the chairs. She watched as he moved about the kitchen with efficiency, serving up bowls of stew and placing a basket of fresh bread on the table. When they were both seated, Caleb bowed his head briefly in a silent prayer before picking up his spoon. Sarah followed suit, the stew rich and hearty on her tongue, the best thing she'd tasted in weeks. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," Caleb said after they'd eaten in silence for a few minutes. "But it might help to know your name at least." Sarah hesitated, then decided her first name couldn't hurt. "Sarah," she offered. Caleb smiled. "Nice to meet you properly, Sarah. I'm Caleb Tucker." The simple exchange, so normal in its courtesy, nearly brought tears to Sarah's eyes. How long had it been since someone had simply been kind without wanting something from her? "Thank you," she said quietly, "for the food and everything." "You're welcome." He took a bite of bread. "If you're feeling up to it, Mrs. Abernathy can take you into town tomorrow to get whatever you need. She's a good woman, though she talks more than most." Sarah tensed at the mention of town. "I'd rather not go into town just yet." Caleb nodded, not pressing the issue. "That's fine. She can bring things out to you. Just let her know what you need." They ate the rest of the meal with Caleb occasionally mentioning neutral topics: the weather, his cattle, the history of the ranch. Sarah listened more than she spoke, but found herself relaxing slightly in his presence. There was something steady about Caleb Tucker, a quiet strength that didn't demand attention but was unmistakably there. After dinner, Sarah insisted on helping with the dishes despite Caleb's protests. "Least I can do," she said firmly, already rolling up her sleeves. They worked side by side, Caleb washing while Sarah dried. The domestic scene felt surreal to her, so normal when nothing in her life had been normal for so long. "If you want," Caleb said as they finished, "there are some books you can borrow. Might help pass the time." Sarah glanced at the bookshelves with undisguised longing. Reading had been her escape since childhood. I'd like that very much. Caleb seemed pleased by her interest. Take whatever catches your eye. My ma was a school teacher before she married Pa. She made sure we always had plenty to read. Sarah ran her fingers along the spines, eventually selecting a volume of Tennyson's poetry. This one, if you don't mind. Good choice. Caleb walked her to the door when she was ready to leave. If you need anything during the night, don't hesitate to come knock. Thank you, but I'll be fine. Sarah clutched the book to her chest like a shield. Good night then, Sarah. The way he said her name respectfully but with a hint of warmth made something flutter in her chest. Good night, Mr. Tucker. Caleb, he corrected gently. Just Caleb is fine. Sarah nodded and made her way back to the cabin through the twilight, Dusty the collie escorting her part of the way before bounding back to her master. Inside the cabin, Sarah lit the lamp and stoked the fire in the stove before settling onto the bed with her borrowed book. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel something close to peace. Morning brought Mrs. Abernathy, a plump, energetic woman in her 50s who arrived with a basket of supplies and enough chatter for 10 people. She reminded Sarah of a hummingbird, constantly in motion as she bustled about the cabin, checking the stove, straightening the bedding, and unpacking her basket, all while maintaining a steady stream of conversation. Mr. Tucker said you needed some things, dear. I've brought soap, a hairbrush, some undergarments, and 2 dresses that should fit well enough until we can get you properly outfitted. My Jenny was about your size before she married and moved to Denver last year. Such a lovely wedding it was, though her father-in-law got into the whiskey and made quite a spectacle of himself during the toasts. Sarah tried to keep up with the rapid shifts in topics while examining the clothes Mrs. Abernathy had brought. They were simple but well-made, a blue calico everyday dress and a slightly nicer green one with a white collar. This is too much, Sarah protested. I can't accept all this. Mrs. Abernathy waved away her concerns. Nonsense, dear. Those dresses were just gathering dust. Besides, Mr. Tucker instructed me to make sure you had everything you needed, and I never disobey Mr. Tucker. Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, I have. Such a good man, even after all he's been through. Not many would come out the other side of such tragedy with their hearts still open. Sarah's curiosity was piqued despite herself. Tragedy. Mrs. Abernathy's expression softened. Oh my, did I speak out of turn? Well, I suppose it's no secret in town. Mr. Tucker was engaged to be married 6 years ago, lovely girl named Rebecca. She took sick with pneumonia just 3 weeks before the wedding. Didn't make it. She shook her head sadly. Nearly destroyed him. That's when he went through his dark period, the drinking and such. But he pulled himself out of it, recommitted to the ranch. He's not one to let sorrow define him, though I know he still carries it. Sarah absorbed this information, thinking of the kindness Caleb had shown her. Perhaps his own experience with pain had made him more attuned to others' suffering. Mrs. Abernathy stayed for about an hour, helping Sarah wash her hair and leaving detailed instructions about which neighboring farms had eligible bachelor's information Sarah had not requested and did not need. Finally, the housekeeper departed with a promise to return in 2 days. Alone again, Sarah changed into the blue calico dress, reveling in the feeling of clean clothes against freshly washed skin. She used the brush to work through her long auburn hair until it shone, then tied it back with a ribbon Mrs. Abernathy had included among the supplies. Looking at her reflection in the small mirror, Sarah hardly recognized herself. The woman staring back at her looked almost normal, not like someone who had fled in the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and terrible secrets weighing on her heart. The morning passed quietly as Sarah tidied the cabin and read more of the Tennyson. Around noon, a knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Caleb standing there, hat in hand. "Hope I'm not disturbing you," he said. "I'm heading out to check on some fencing on the north pasture. Thought you might like to come along for the ride if you're feeling cooped up." Sarah hesitated. The cabin was safe, known. Outside was vast and uncertain, but the day was beautiful, and something about Caleb's open expression made her nod. "I'd like that," she said. "Just give me a moment." She grabbed her shawl and followed him to where two horses were waiting, Caleb's tall chestnut gelding and a smaller, dappled mare. "This is Daisy," Caleb said, patting the mare's neck. "Gentlest horse on the ranch. You ride much?" "It's been a while," Sarah admitted. In fact, it had been years since she'd been on horseback, not since before her marriage. "Daisy will take good care of you," Caleb assured her, offering his cupped hands to help her mount. Soon they were riding across the vast expanse of Caleb's property, the spring sun warm on their backs. Sarah had forgotten the simple joy of horseback riding, the rhythm of it, the connection with the animal beneath her, the feeling of freedom. They rode mostly in comfortable silence, with Caleb occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing bits of ranch history. At the north pasture fence line, Caleb dismounted to examine some damaged posts. Sarah stayed on Daisy, watching him work. His movements were efficient and practiced, his strong hands making quick work of the repairs. There was something compelling about competence, Sarah realized, about someone who knew exactly what they were doing and did it well. "Mind if I ask you something?" Caleb said suddenly, looking up from his work. Sarah tensed. "Depends on the question." "Fair enough." He hammered in another nail before continuing. "What were you planning to do if I hadn't found you in the church that morning?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know," she admitted after a moment. "Move on to the next town, I suppose, find work somewhere." "What kind of work do you do?" His tone remained conversational, not pressing. "I can sew," Sarah said. "And I'm good with numbers. I kept the books for—" She stopped abruptly, realizing she'd nearly revealed too much. Caleb seemed to sense her discomfort and changed the subject. "Ranch could use some help with bookkeeping if you're interested. Previous foreman was many things, but organized wasn't one of them. Account books are a mess." Sarah stared at him, surprised. "You trust me with your accounts? You don't even know me." Caleb shrugged, gathering his tools. "I'm a decent judge of character. Besides, not much to steal out here, even if you were the type, which I don't think you are." The casual vote of confidence meant more to Sarah than she could express. "I'd be happy to look at the books," she said softly. "I should earn my keep somehow." "We can start tomorrow if you'd like." Caleb mounted his horse in one fluid motion. "For now, want to see something special?" Curiosity piqued. Sarah nodded. Caleb led them away from the fence line, up a gentle slope covered in wildflowers. At the top was a lone oak tree, massive and ancient, with branches spreading wide in all directions. "My thinking tree," Caleb explained as they dismounted. "Best view on the property." He was right. From this vantage point, they could see the entire valley, the ranch buildings, the cattle grazing in distant fields, the mountains beyond. The beauty of it stole Sarah's breath. "It's magnificent," she whispered. Caleb nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Worth protecting, isn't it? This land, this life." "Yes," Sarah agreed, surprising herself with how much she meant it. They sat beneath the oak tree's shade, sharing a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and apples that Caleb had packed. The conversation flowed more easily now, though they still danced around certain topics. Sarah learned that Caleb had a younger brother in Denver who was a lawyer, that he'd fought briefly in the latter part of the Civil War, despite being very young, and that his favorite season was autumn. In return, she shared small, safe facts about herself: her love of poetry, her preference for berry pie over apple, her skill at chess. "We should play sometime," Caleb suggested. I have my father's old set in the house. I'd like that, Sarah said, realizing she meant it. There was something refreshing about Caleb's straightforward manner, his lack of pretense. By the time they returned to the ranch, the sun was beginning to lower in the sky. Sarah felt lighter somehow, as though the open air and honest company had lifted some invisible burden from her shoulders. Thank you for today, she said as Caleb helped her dismount outside the cabin. It was nice to feel normal for a while. Something flickered in Caleb's eyes, understanding, perhaps. Everyone deserves to feel normal, Sarah. Whatever brought you here, whatever you're running from, it doesn't define all of who you are. His words hit so close to what she needed to hear that tears threatened. She blinked them back hurriedly. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Sarah. As the days passed, Sarah fell into a routine at the ranch. Each morning after breakfast, she would work on Caleb's account books in the small study of the main house. The task was perfect for her methodical work that required concentration, but allowed her mind to settle. Caleb had been right about the state of the records. They were a disaster of incomplete entries and haphazard calculations. Bringing order to the chaos gave Sarah a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. In the afternoons, she would help Mrs. Abernathy with household tasks, tend to a small vegetable garden she'd started beside her cabin, or accompany Caleb on his rounds of the ranch when invited. The evenings were often spent in Caleb's company, sharing meals, playing chess. She won more often than he did. Or simply reading in companionable silence by the fire. 2 weeks into her stay, Sarah realized with a start that she was happy. The realization came to her one evening as she and Caleb sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Dusty was curled at their feet, and the distant sound of cattle lowing drifted on the gentle breeze. Penny for your thoughts, Caleb said, noticing her introspective expression. Sarah smiled. I was just thinking that this is nice, peaceful. It is, Caleb agreed. Though town's been anything but peaceful lately, Sarah tensed. What do you mean? Nothing serious, he assured her. Just gossip about some big city fellow passing through, asking questions about a woman. Probably nothing. The cup of tea Sarah had been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the porch floor. Caleb looked at her in alarm. Sarah, what is it? I should go, she stammered, rising to her feet. I've stayed too long already. Caleb stood too, concern etched on his features. Sarah, wait, talk to me. What's wrong? She shook her head, backing away. I can't, I'm sorry, but I can't. Before he could say anything else, she fled down the porch steps and ran toward her cabin, heart pounding in her ears. Inside, she began gathering her few possessions with trembling hands. She had to leave tonight before he found her, before she put Caleb in danger. A knock at the door made her freeze. Sarah, Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. Please let me in. Go away, Caleb, please. Not until I know you're all right. I'm fine. I just need to be alone. A pause. You're packing to leave, aren't you? Sarah sighed, leaning her forehead against the door. Yes. Because of what I said about the man in town. Yes. Another pause, longer this time. He's looking for you. It wasn't a question. Yes, Sarah whispered. Did he hurt you? The simple question, asked with such quiet intensity, broke something in Sarah. A sob escaped her throat before she could stop it. Sarah, Caleb's voice was even gentler now. Please let me in. Whatever it is, we can figure it out together, I promise. Slowly, she unlatched the door. Caleb stood there, his face a study in concern and something else, determination, perhaps. I can't stay, she said before he could speak. He'll find me, and when he does. Who is he, Sarah? What are you afraid of? She sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. My husband. Caleb's expression registered surprise, but he quickly masked it. "You're married." I am. I don't know any more." She looked up at him, her green eyes swimming with tears. "His name is James Kincaid. He's a banker from Denver. Everyone there thinks he's respectable, successful, charming. No one knows what he's really like behind closed doors." Understanding dawned in Caleb's eyes. He sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "He abused you." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. "How long?" "3 years. It started small criticism, then shouting, then more. It got worse after I lost the baby." Her voice broke on the last words. Caleb's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained steady. "How did you get away?" "He was away on business. I took what little money I had saved and ran. I knew he'd come after me. I'm his wife, his property in the eyes of the law." Bitterness crept into her tone. "I've been moving from town to town, staying ahead of him, but I'm running out of places to go." "You could divorce him," Caleb suggested gently, "especially with evidence of cruelty." Sarah laughed, a hollow sound. "James would never allow that. His reputation means everything to him. Besides, who would believe me over him? He's careful, never leaves marks where people can see them." She wiped away a tear. "I have to keep running." "No," Caleb's voice was firm. "Running isn't living, Sarah. You deserve better than that." "What choice do I have?" "Stay," he said simply. "Stay here where I can protect you." Sarah shook her head. "I can't ask that of you. You're not asking, I'm offering." Caleb leaned forward, his blue eyes intent. "My brother is a lawyer, remember. He can help with legal protection, and no one enters this property without my say-so." "You don't understand. James is dangerous when he's angry." "So am I," Caleb said quietly, with a certainty that made Sarah believe him. She studied his face, the resolve in his expression, the warmth in his eyes. Against all reason, she wanted to believe him, to trust that this place could be her sanctuary rather than just another temporary stop. "Let me help you, Sarah," Caleb said softly. "Please." The plea in his voice undid her final resistance. She nodded slowly. "All right, but if there's any sign of danger to you or the ranch, I'm leaving. I won't have anyone else hurt because of me." "Fair enough." Relief flooded his features. "We'll figure this out together, I promise." As Sarah looked into Caleb's steadfast gaze, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Small and fragile, but unmistakably there. The next morning, Caleb rode into town to send a telegram to his brother in Denver. While he was gone, Sarah remained in the cabin, alternating between anxiety and a strange sense of liberation. She had finally spoken the truth out loud, shared the burden she'd been carrying alone for so long. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't face it in isolation. Caleb returned by midday, bringing supplies and news. "Daniel will be here within a week," he reported, referring to his brother. "He says there are legal options, especially given what you've endured, and he's going to discreetly gather information about Kincaid's current whereabouts." Sarah nodded, grateful but still fearful. "What about the man asking questions in town?" "Moved on to Leadville, according to Sheriff Davis, looking for his cousin, a woman with red hair traveling alone." Caleb's expression darkened. "Not Kincaid himself, but likely someone he hired." "A detective," Sarah murmured. "James would use intermediaries to avoid scandal." "Well, he didn't find anything here. Sheriff thinks you're my late cousin from back east, come to help with household matters after my housekeeper mentioned needing assistance." "As far as anyone in Granite knows, you've been here for months." The simplicity and effectiveness of the cover story impressed Sarah. "You've thought of everything," Caleb shrugged. "Just being practical. Now, how about some lunch? Mrs. Abernathy made chicken pie before she left." Over the next few days, Sarah ventured out of the cabin more, regaining her confidence in small increments. She continued working on the account books, finding satisfaction in bringing the ranch's finances into perfect order. In the evenings, she and Caleb would sit together, sometimes talking long into the night. He told her about his childhood on the ranch, about Rebecca and the dark days after her death, about his dreams for the future. In return, Sarah gradually shared more of herself, her childhood in St. Louis, her love of music, the hopes she'd once had before her marriage had crushed them. What began as friendship was evolving into something deeper, though neither acknowledged it openly. There were moments when their eyes would meet over the chessboard, or their hands would brush while passing a book, and the air between them would seem to thicken with unspoken possibilities. But always, the shadow of Sarah's marriage loomed over them, an obstacle that could not be ignored. Daniel Tucker arrived on a sunny afternoon, riding up to the main house on a rented horse. Sarah watched from the window as Caleb greeted his brother with a warm embrace. The family resemblance was clear, though Daniel was slighter of build and wore the refined clothes of a city lawyer rather than the practical attire of a rancher. Caleb brought his brother to meet Sarah, his manner reassuring as he made the introductions. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Kincaid," Daniel said formally, shaking her hand. "My brother has explained your situation. I want you to know that I'm here to help in any way I can." "Thank you," Sarah replied, "and please call me Sarah." They settled in Caleb's study, where Daniel laid out the legal realities of Sarah's situation with gentle directness. "Divorce on grounds of cruelty is possible," he explained, "but would require evidence and testimony. Given Mr. Kincaid's standing in Denver society, it would be challenging but not impossible." "What about simply remaining separated?" Sarah asked. "I don't care about his money, I just want to be free of him." Daniel exchanged a glance with Caleb. "That's the simpler route legally, but it doesn't provide you with the same protections. As your husband, he still has certain rights under the law. Rights to control my property, my movements, my life," Sarah said bitterly. "Unfortunately, yes," Daniel confirmed. "However, there is some good news. I've made discreet inquiries, and it appears James Kincaid has overextended himself financially. There are rumors of questionable business dealings, possibly even fraud. If those allegations prove true, his position would be significantly weakened." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. "How can we find out?" "I have contacts at the Denver Banking Commission," Daniel said. "They're already investigating discreetly. In the meantime, I've prepared legal documentation that, while not a divorce, will provide some measure of protection." He withdrew several papers from his briefcase. "A formal separation agreement including provisions against harassment or forcible return." "Will that stop him?" Sarah asked skeptically. "Legally, yes. Practically?" Daniel sighed. "That depends on the man." "Then we need more than legal papers," Caleb interjected firmly. "We need to make sure he understands that Sarah is under my protection now." The possessive note in his voice made Sarah glance at him sharply. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgment of feelings neither had yet dared to voice. Daniel stayed for 3 days, helping Sarah prepare affidavits detailing the abuse she had suffered and advising her on the legal proceedings that might lie ahead. His presence was reassuring, another ally in her corner, another person who believed her story and wanted to help. On the morning of Daniel's departure, he took Sarah aside for a private conversation on the porch. "I'll do everything I can from Denver," he promised. "But I wanted to say something else, something personal." Sarah tilted her head questioningly. "My brother cares for you," Daniel said simply. "More than he's cared for anyone since Rebecca. I haven't seen him look at someone the way he looks at you in a very long time." Warmth spread through Sarah's chest, but uncertainty quickly followed. Even if that's true, my situation makes any attachment complicated. Life is complicated, Daniel replied with a small smile. But sometimes the most complicated paths lead to the greatest happiness. He clasped her hand briefly. Just something to consider. After Daniel left, a new routine established itself at the ranch. Sarah divided her time between the account books, helping with household tasks, and learning more about the ranch operations. Caleb showed her how to manage the vegetable garden more effectively, taught her to ride better, and even at her insistence began teaching her how to shoot. "I hope you never need this," he said as they stood in a clearing behind the barn, a revolver in Sarah's hand. "But knowing how to defend yourself is never a bad thing." Sarah concentrated on the target, a series of tin cans arranged on a fallen log. Her first shots went wide, but by the end of the lesson, she was hitting her mark more often than not. The weight of the gun was unfamiliar but not unwelcome. There was power in knowing she wasn't helpless. As May turned to June, the days grew longer and warmer. Sarah found herself settling deeper into ranch life, her fear gradually receding. Weekly letters from Daniel brought updates the banking commission's investigation into James was progressing, though slowly. The separation papers had been filed. No one had seen the detective in any neighboring towns recently. One evening in late June, Caleb suggested they ride to his thinking tree to watch the sunset. The day had been particularly hot, but now a cool breeze was stirring, bringing relief from the summer heat. They rode in companionable silence, Dusty bounding ahead of them. Sarah had grown comfortable on horseback again, finding joy in the freedom of movement across the open land. As they reached the oak tree and dismounted, she realized how much her body had changed in these months at the ranch, stronger now from daily physical activity. Her skin lightly tanned from time in the sun, her step more confident. They spread a blanket beneath the tree and sat side by side, watching as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson. "It's been almost 3 months since I found you in the church," Caleb said quietly, breaking the silence. Sarah nodded, remembering her fear and exhaustion that day. "I never thanked you properly for what you did, taking in a stranger, offering sanctuary without question. It was an extraordinary kindness." "Not so extraordinary," Caleb replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It was the right thing to do." "Still," Sarah insisted, turning to face him, "you saved me, Caleb, in more ways than you know." His eyes met hers, intense and earnest. "You've brought something back to this ranch, Sarah, something I thought I'd lost for good, life maybe, or hope." He hesitated, then continued softly. "I know your situation is complicated. I know there are obstacles still to overcome, but I need you to know how I feel." Sarah's heart quickened. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been waiting for you without knowing it," he said simply. "Like everything that happened, all the pain, all the loss was leading me to that morning in the church." His hand found hers on the blanket, strong fingers intertwining with hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Sarah. I think I started falling the moment I saw you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming emotion his declaration evoked. "Caleb, she faltered, struggling to find the right words. "I feel the same way. But I'm still married, still bound by laws and vows, no matter how James has violated them." "I know," Caleb said gently. "I'm not asking for promises. I'm not asking for anything you can't give. I just needed you to know that whatever happens, however long it takes, my feelings won't change." Sarah raised her free hand to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I never thought I could feel this way again, safe, respected, cherished. You've given me back pieces of myself I thought were lost forever." Caleb turned his face to press a kiss to her palm, the gesture both tender and reverent. Then, with infinite gentleness, he leaned forward and touched his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Sarah leaned into it, her hand sliding to the back of his neck. For a perfect moment, the past and future fell away, leaving only this present connection between them. When they finally parted, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky ablaze with the last golden light of day. "Whatever comes," Caleb whispered, "we'll face it together." Sarah believed him with all her heart. July arrived with sweltering heat, and the exciting news that the Banking Commission had expanded its investigation into James Kincaid's affairs. Daniel's letters grew more frequent, each bringing hope that Sarah's legal entanglement might soon be resolved. Life at the ranch continued its pleasant rhythm. Sarah had fully embraced her role managing the household accounts and had even begun to assist with some of the business correspondence. The small cabin no longer felt like a temporary shelter, but like a home, her first true home in years. Her relationship with Caleb deepened with each passing day. They were careful to maintain propriety. Sarah was still legally married. After all, but the connection between them was undeniable and increasingly acknowledged by those around them. Mrs. Abernathy would smile knowingly when she saw them together, and the ranch hands tipped their hats with extra respect when addressing Sarah. "You're good for the boss," Manuel, the oldest hand, told her one afternoon as she brought lemonade to the men working on mending the corral. "Haven't seen him this happy in years." The comment warmed Sarah's heart. She wanted to be good for Caleb, to bring him joy as he had brought her peace. But peace, as Sarah well knew, could be fragile. The reminder came in early August when Caleb returned from town with a troubled expression. "What is it?" Sarah asked, immediately sensing his unease as he entered the kitchen where she was preparing dinner. Caleb removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "James Kincaid was in town today, asking questions at the general store." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "He's here." "In Granite was here," Caleb corrected. "Left on the afternoon stage to Leadville, but he left his card with several merchants offering a reward for information about his missing wife." Sarah sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "He's getting closer." Caleb knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in his. "Listen to me, Sarah. This is your home now. I won't let him take you anywhere against your will." "You don't know James," she whispered. "When he wants something, he doesn't stop until he gets it." "Neither do I," Caleb said firmly. "I've already sent word to Daniel. He'll expedite the legal proceedings." Sarah nodded mechanically, but fear had wrapped icy fingers around her heart. James's appearance in Granite was no coincidence. Somehow, he had traced her movements, narrowed down his search. It was only a matter of time before he made the connection to the Tucker Ranch. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She paced the small cabin, jumping at every sound from the darkness outside. Around midnight, a soft knock at the door made her freeze in terror until Caleb's gentle voice called her name. She opened the door to find him standing there, rifle in hand, Dusty at his side. "Thought you might be having trouble sleeping," he said softly. "I've been patrolling the property." "Everything's quiet." Relief washed over Sarah. "You should be resting, not standing guard." "Wouldn't be able to rest anyway, knowing you were worried," he hesitated. "If you'd feel safer in the main house." Sarah shook her head. "No, I'm all right, truly." She managed a small smile. "Knowing you're out there helps," Caleb nodded. "I'll be within shouting distance all night. Try to get some sleep." She wanted to ask him to stay, to hold her until the fear subsided, but propriety and her own complicated status held her back. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you, Caleb, for everything." His eyes, illuminated by moonlight, held a depth of feeling that needed no words. "Always," he replied softly, before disappearing back into the night. The next few days passed in a state of heightened vigilance. Caleb informed his ranch hands of the situation, and they established an informal watch system. Sarah rarely went anywhere alone, though she chafed at the constraints her fear imposed. "I refuse to be a prisoner on this ranch," she told Caleb one afternoon as they rode along the creek that marked the eastern boundary of his property. "I won't let James steal my freedom again." "No one's suggesting that," Caleb assured her, "but caution isn't the same as captivity." Sarah sighed, knowing he was right. "I hate that he still has this power, that just the thought of him can make me feel small again." Caleb reined his horse closer to hers. "You're not small, Sarah. You're the strongest person I know. You survived what he did to you. You rebuilt yourself." "That's not something many people could do." His words bolstered her spirits as they always did. Since her arrival at the ranch, Caleb had never once treated her as a victim or a charity case. He saw her strength even when she couldn't see it herself. A week passed without incident. Then, too, Sarah began to hope that perhaps James had moved on, following false leads elsewhere. Daniel's letters brought encouraging news. The banking commission had found significant irregularities in James's accounts, and formal charges were likely forthcoming. The separation papers had been properly filed and acknowledged by the court. By late August, the most intense heat of summer had begun to wane. The ranch was busy with preparations for the fall cattle drive, and Sarah threw herself into the work, helping organize supplies and finalize accounts. The routine helped keep her fears at bay, as did Caleb's steady presence. Then came the day that changed everything. Sarah was alone in the main house, completing the monthly ledger entries while Caleb and most of the hands were out working the north pasture. Mrs. Abernathy had left early for a church meeting in town. The only other person on the property was young Tommy, a 16-year-old hand left behind to shoe some horses in the barn. The sound of an approaching carriage drew Sarah to the window. A smart black buggy was coming up the drive, pulled by two matching bay horses. Her heart stopped when she recognized the figure holding the reins, the immaculately dressed man with the precisely trimmed dark beard and the cold eyes that had haunted her nightmares for months. James Kincaid had found her. For a moment, panic paralyzed her. Then survival instinct took over. Sarah moved quickly to Caleb's study, opening the drawer where he kept his revolver. Her hands shook as she checked that it was loaded, remembering Caleb's patient lessons. She considered running but knew she couldn't outpace the buggy. The barn was too far, and calling for Tommy might put the boy in danger. Her best option was to face James from a position of strength inside the house, armed, on territory she now knew well. Sarah positioned herself in the sitting room, where she could see the front door but remain partially concealed by a high-backed chair. The revolver felt heavy in her hand, but she gripped it firmly, trying to control her rapid breathing. The knock, when it came, was surprisingly polite, 3 measured taps that belied the violence Sarah knew James was capable of. She remained silent, hoping he might think no one was home and leave. No such luck. "Sarah," James called, his voice carrying through the door with the cultured tone she remembered so well. "I know you're in there. The stable boy told me the lady of the house was working on the books today." Sarah silently cursed. Tommy wouldn't have known to be discreet. He had no reason to suspect a well-dressed visitor meant harm. "I just want to talk," James continued when she didn't respond. "Is that too much to ask of my wife?" The false reasonableness in his voice made Sarah's skin crawl. She had heard that tone before, right before his hand would strike her face or his belt would leave welts across her back. "Go away, James," she finally called, her voice steadier than she felt. "There's nothing to discuss." A pause. Then, "You've put me through quite a lot of trouble, Sarah. The least you could do is open the door." "No." Sarah tightened her grip on the revolver. "I'm not going anywhere with you. The separation papers have been filed. It's over." A soft, unpleasant laugh. "Is that what your Cowboy's lawyer brother told you, that a few papers could end our marriage?" How naive. Sarah's blood ran cold. He knew about Daniel, about Caleb. How long had he been watching before making his move? "My patience is wearing thin, Sarah." James's voice hardened. "Open this door or I'll open it myself." "I have a gun," Sarah warned, "and I know how to use it." Another laugh, this one genuinely amused. "You, with a gun? Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. You can barely open a jar without assistance." The casual dismissal of her capabilities ignited a spark of anger in Sarah's chest, burning away some of the fear. James still saw her as the cowed, dependent woman she had been in Denver. He had no idea who she had become in these months of freedom. "Last warning, James," she called. "Leave now, or I'll shoot." "I think not," James replied, and the door suddenly splintered inward as he kicked it with surprising force. He stood framed in the doorway, elegant in his tailored suit despite the violence of his entry. His dark eyes found her immediately, narrowing at the sight of the revolver in her hands. "Put that down before you hurt yourself," he said coolly, stepping into the house as though he owned it. "We both know you won't use it." Sarah raised the gun, aiming at his chest as Caleb had taught her. "You don't know me anymore." "You're my wife," James countered, moving closer despite the weapon pointed at him. "I know everything about you, your weaknesses, your fears, your pathetic need to be loved." His gaze swept dismissively around the room. "Is that what you think you found here? Love, with some dirt poor rancher?" "Don't speak about him," Sarah said, her voice low with warning. "Take one more step and I'll fire." Something in her tone must have convinced him she was serious because James stopped advancing. His expression shifted to one of calculated charm. "Come now, Sarah. This foolishness has gone on long enough. I'm willing to be magnanimous to forgive your indiscretions. Come home and we can put this unfortunate chapter behind us." "I am home," Sarah replied firmly, "and there's nothing to forgive. You're the one who broke our vows when you raised your hand against me." James's face darkened. "A husband has the right to discipline his wife. Perhaps if you hadn't been so willful." "Stop." Sarah cut him off, disgusted. "I won't listen to your justifications. The law may still consider me your wife, but in every way that matters, our marriage is over." "Because you found comfort in another man's bed," James sneered. "Do you think your Cowboy will still want you when he learns what a failure you are as a wife? That you couldn't even carry a child to term?" The cruel words struck deep, but Sarah refused to show it. "Caleb knows everything about me, the good and the bad, and he loves me anyway, something you never did." Rage flashed across James's face, his mask of civility cracking. "You ungrateful whore. After everything I gave you, you gave me pain," Sarah interrupted, her voice rising. "You gave me fear. You gave me scars I'll carry forever. The only thing of value you ever gave me was the lesson that I deserve better." James lunged forward suddenly, his control snapping. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger, but she hesitated a crucial second, enough time for James to knock the gun from her hand. It clattered to the floor, sliding under a nearby cabinet. His hand closed around her throat, backing her against the wall. "You'll regret that," he hissed, his face contorted with fury. "When I'm finished with you, your precious Cowboy won't recognize what's left." Sarah clawed at his hand, struggling to breathe. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She fought desperately, kicking and thrashing, but James was stronger. His grip tightened, cutting off her air completely. Just as darkness began to close in, the pressure suddenly released. Sarah collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. Through watering eyes, she saw Caleb standing over James's prone form, fists clenched and eyes blazing with a fury she had never seen in him before. "Touch her again," Caleb said, his voice dangerously quiet, "and it will be the last thing you ever do." James wiped blood from his split lip, looking up at Caleb with cold hatred. "This is none of your concern. She's my wife." "She's under my protection," Caleb countered, helping Sarah to her feet while keeping himself between her and James. "And you're trespassing on my property." James rose slowly, straightening his jacket with exaggerated care. "I see how it is. You filled her head with nonsense, turned her against her lawful husband. Perhaps you're not aware of the legal penalties for alienation of affection, Mr. Tucker. Perhaps you're not aware of the legal penalties for fraud, Mr. Kincaid," came a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Daniel Tucker standing there, flanked by Sheriff Davis and another man in a suit. "Impeccable timing, brother," Caleb said with grim satisfaction. Daniel nodded, stepping into the room with a leather portfolio under his arm. "I received your telegram about Mr. Kincaid's appearance in Granite and thought I should expedite matters." He turned to James. "Mr. Kincaid, this is Mr. Harrington from the Colorado Banking Commission. He has some questions about certain irregularities in your accounts." James's face paled slightly, but he maintained his arrogant demeanor. "Any discrepancies in my records are clerical errors, nothing more. Clerical errors totaling over $50,000. Mr. Harrington raised an eyebrow. "That's quite careless." "This is absurd," James sputtered. "I came here for my wife, not to discuss banking matters." Sheriff Davis stepped forward, his weathered face stern. "Mr. Kincaid, I'm placing you under arrest on charges of assault and breaking and entering. We can discuss the banking irregularities once you're in my jail." "You can't be serious." James looked around incredulously. "She's my wife." "I have every right." "Not anymore," Daniel interrupted, removing papers from his portfolio. "The court has approved an emergency order of protection based on evidence of sustained abuse. Additionally, I've just come from Denver with news that your petition to contest the separation has been denied." He handed the documents to James. "You are legally prohibited from approaching Mrs. Kincaid or communicating with her in any way." James stared at the papers, his face contorting with rage. "This is your doing," he spat at Sarah. "You'll regret this. All of you will." "The only one with regrets will be you," Sheriff Davis said, producing handcuffs. "Now, are you coming quietly, or do we need to do this the hard way?" For a moment, it seemed James might resist. Then, with a final venomous glare at Sarah, he allowed himself to be handcuffed. "This isn't over," he warned as the sheriff led him away. "Yes, it is," Sarah replied softly, standing tall beside Caleb. For the first time since she'd fled Denver, she truly believed it. After James was taken away, the house fell into a stunned silence. Mr. Harrington excused himself to accompany the sheriff, explaining that he would need to take formal statements later but wanted to ensure Kincaid was securely in custody first. Daniel closed the broken door as best he could, then turned to Sarah with concern. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" Sarah touched her throat where she could feel bruises forming from James's grip. "I'll be fine, just shaken." She looked at Caleb, who hadn't left her side since the confrontation. "How did you know to come back?" "Tommy," Caleb explained, his voice still tight with residual anger. "He didn't like the look of your visitor, so he rode out to fetch me. Good thing he did. And I arrived on the evening train intending to surprise you with the news about the protection order," Daniel added. "The sheriff met me at the station with Mr. Harrington, who'd come specifically to investigate Kincaid. When we heard what was happening, we came straight here." Sarah sank into a chair, the full impact of the day's events finally hitting her. Is it really over? Legally, I mean. Daniel sat across from her. The separation is finalized. The protection order is in place. And with the banking fraud charges, Kincaid will be far too busy defending himself to trouble you further. He smiled gently. It may take time for a full divorce to be granted, but yes, Sarah, the worst is over. Tears of relief filled Sarah's eyes. Caleb knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. You were so brave, he said softly. I heard what you said to him before I came in. You stood your ground. Sarah squeezed his hands. I've learned from the best. Daniel cleared his throat. I should go check on the sheriff's progress, and perhaps see about getting that door fixed before nightfall. With a knowing smile at the couple, he excused himself, leaving Sarah and Caleb alone. As soon as Daniel was gone, Caleb pulled Sarah into his arms, holding her as though afraid she might disappear. When I saw his hands on you, his voice broke. I've never wanted to kill a man before today. Sarah pressed her face into his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent of leather and pine. You saved me. Again. You were saving yourself, Caleb countered, stroking her hair. I just helped finish what you started. He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. I'm so proud of you, Sarah. And so grateful you're safe. I'm safe because of you, she whispered, because you offered shelter to a stranger sleeping in church pews instead of judgment. She touched his face gently. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You gave me hope when I thought it was lost forever. You gave me love when I believed I was unlovable. Sarah, Caleb's voice was rough with emotion. I meant what I said before. I love you. When the divorce is final, if you'll have me, yes, she interrupted, tears streaming freely now. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her, then not the gentle, questioning kiss they had shared beneath the oak tree, but a kiss of certainty and promise, of passion long restrained, finally given freedom. Sarah returned it with equal fervor, pouring all her love and gratitude into the connection between them. When they finally parted, both breathless, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I should help Daniel with that door, he murmured reluctantly. Sarah smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. We have time, she said. All the time in the world now. Winter came to Granite with heavy snows and bright, crisp days. The ranch settled into its cold weather rhythms, cattle in the sheltered valleys, horses in the barn, evenings spent by roaring fires. Sarah's divorce was progressing through the courts, expedited by James's increasingly dire legal troubles. The Banking Commission had uncovered evidence of extensive fraud, and additional charges were pending. He remained in custody, his former social standing in Denver crumbling as the truth about his business practices and rumors about his treatment of his wife spread through society. Sarah had moved into the main house after James's arrest, though she maintained strict propriety by taking the guest room. Mrs. Abernathy's presence as chaperone silenced any potential gossip in town. Though most of Granite's residents had embraced Sarah as Caleb's intended, legal complications notwithstanding, Christmas approached, bringing with it a festive atmosphere despite the cold. Sarah and Mrs. Abernathy decorated the house with pine boughs and ribbons. They baked cookies and pies, preparing for the small gathering Caleb had planned for Christmas Eve. Just the ranch hands, Daniel, who was visiting again, and Pastor James and his wife. On the morning of Christmas Eve, Sarah woke to find snow falling gently outside her window. The world looked clean and new, covered in pristine white. She dressed warmly and went downstairs to find Caleb already at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand and a mysterious smile on his face. "Good morning," she said, bending to kiss his cheek before pouring her own coffee. "Morning," he replied, watching her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "Sleep well." "Very." Sarah sat beside him, enjoying the comfortable domesticity they had established. "What has you looking so pleased with yourself this morning?" "Can a man be happy on Christmas Eve?" Caleb countered, his smile widening. "Actually, I have something to show you. Bundle up, it's outside." Curious, Sarah finished her coffee quickly and donned her coat, gloves, and scarf. Caleb led her out into the snowy morning, their boots crunching on the fresh powder. Instead of heading toward the barn or any of the outbuildings, he guided her to the oak tree on the hill, their special place, though they rarely visited it in winter. As they crested the hill, Sarah gasped. Beneath the oak's bare branches stood a small, newly constructed gazebo, its wooden framework dusted with snow and decorated with evergreen garlands. "Caleb," she breathed, taking in the beautiful structure. "When did you?" "The men and I have been working on it in secret for weeks," he explained, looking pleased at her reaction. "I thought it would be nice to have a sheltered place up here, so we can come even when the weather's not perfect." Sarah walked slowly toward the gazebo, admiring the craftsmanship. Inside, a small bench offered a place to sit and enjoy the view, which was spectacular even in winter, the snow-covered valley stretching out below them, the mountains majestic in the distance. "It's wonderful," she said, turning to find Caleb watching her with an expression of pure love. "Thank you." "There's more," he said softly, reaching into his coat pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box, and Sarah's heart began to race. Caleb took both her hands in his. "I know we can't make it official until the divorce is final, but I couldn't wait any longer to ask." He dropped to one knee in the snow, opening the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "Sarah Kincaid, will you marry me?" Though she had known this moment would come, had dreamed of it for months, Sarah found herself overwhelmed with emotion. Tears sprang to her eyes, tears of joy, not sorrow, for perhaps the first time in her life. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Caleb Tucker, I will marry you." His smile was brighter than the snow-reflected sunlight as he rose to slip the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Pa gave it to me before he passed, said I should save it for when I found the right woman." "It's beautiful," Sarah said, admiring the way the diamond caught the light. "And even more special knowing it belonged to your mother." Caleb drew her close, his arms strong and secure around her. "I love you, Sarah, more than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him as snowflakes drifted gently around them. "You've given me the greatest gift I could ever receive, a second chance at happiness." They remained in the gazebo for a long time, planning their future together. They would marry in the spring, after the divorce was final. They would expand the ranch, perhaps build a school on the property for the children of the hands. And someday, when they were ready, they would start a family of their own, the family Sarah had always dreamed of but had feared might never be hers. As they walked back to the house, hand in hand through the falling snow, Sarah felt complete. The broken, frightened woman who had slept in church pews was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone loved, someone free. The path that had led her to Caleb had been painful and fraught with danger. But standing beside him now, with his ring on her finger and his love surrounding her like a shield, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, home, at last. On a bright April morning in 1879, Sarah stood before the mirror in what had once been the guest room but would soon be vacated entirely. Her reflection showed a woman transformed from the desperate fugitive who had arrived in Granite nearly a year before. Her auburn hair was arranged in soft curls, adorned with small white flowers. Her cheeks held a healthy glow, and her green eyes sparkled with happiness. The dress she wore was simple but elegant ivory satin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, made specially by Mrs. Abernathy and the ladies of the church sewing circle. At her throat hung a small gold locket, a gift from Caleb that morning, containing a tiny portrait of his parents on one side and space on the other, for our own family someday, as his note had said. A knock at the door preceded Daniel's entrance. He would be giving her away today, a role he had accepted with evident pride. "You look beautiful, Sarah," he said, offering his arm. "My brother is a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Sarah replied, taking a last look at her reflection before accepting his arm. "Is everything ready?" "The minister is in position, the guests are seated, and Caleb is practically wearing a path in the ground with his pacing," Daniel reported with a grin. "I believe that's what they call ready." Sarah laughed, her heart so full of joy she could scarcely contain it. The divorce had been finalized a month ago, James's attempts to contest it undermined by his increasingly precarious legal position. He now faced years in prison for his financial crimes, and the court had been sympathetic to Sarah's petition given the evidence of abuse. She was legally free, her maiden name restored, though she would change it again today, this time by choice rather than circumstance. Outside, the ranch was transformed. The ceremony would take place beneath the oak tree, where Caleb had built a more elaborate gazebo specifically for this purpose. Chairs had been arranged in rows, filled with friends from town, neighboring ranchers, and the entire staff of the Tucker Ranch. White ribbons and spring flowers decorated the path from the house to the hilltop. As Sarah and Daniel made their slow progress up the hill, she savored every moment, the warm sunshine on her face, the scent of wildflowers in the air, the smiling faces of those who had accepted her into their community. This day, this joy, had seemed impossible when she had fled Denver with nothing but fear as her companion. And then she saw Caleb waiting for her beneath the gazebo, handsome in his new black suit, his face alight with love as he watched her approach. Beside him stood Pastor James, Bible in hand, and on his other side, Manuel as best man. Time seemed to slow as their eyes met across the remaining distance, an entire conversation passing between them without a word spoken. When Sarah finally reached him, Caleb extended his hand. She placed hers in his, feeling the familiar strength and gentleness in his touch. "You're breathtaking," he whispered as Daniel placed her hand in Caleb's and stepped aside. "So are you," she whispered back, meaning it with all her heart. Pastor James began the ceremony, his words washing over them as they stood together, hands clasped, hearts aligned. Sarah barely heard the familiar liturgy, too lost in the wonder of the moment and the man before her. When the time came for their vows, Caleb spoke first, his voice clear and steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "Sarah, when I found you that morning in the church, I thought I was offering shelter to someone in need. I didn't realize you would be the one sheltering me from loneliness, from a life half lived. You've brought light and laughter back to this ranch and to my heart." He squeezed her hands gently. "I promise to love you completely, to protect you always, to be your partner in all things. I promise to build a life with you filled with joy, respect, and tenderness, the life you deserve." Tears blurred Sarah's vision as she began her own vows. "Caleb, you saw me at my most vulnerable and offered kindness without judgment. You believed in my strength before I remembered it was there. You've taught me that love isn't about possession or control, but about freedom and trust." Her voice caught, then steadied. "I promise to love you faithfully, to stand by your side through whatever life brings, to build our home and family with devotion and care. I promise to cherish every day we're given together, grateful for the second chance we've both been blessed to find." They exchanged rings, Sarah's a simple gold band to match her engagement ring, Caleb's a broader version of the same. When Pastor James pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb's kiss was both tender and triumphant, sealing their commitment before God and their community. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food prepared by Mrs. Abernathy and the church ladies. A small band played, and lanterns were lit as dusk fell, casting a golden glow over the festivities. Sarah and Caleb danced beneath the stars, her head resting on his shoulder as they swayed to the music. "Happy Mrs. Tucker," he murmured against her hair. The name, her new name, freely chosen, filled her with warmth. "Completely," she replied, lifting her face for his kiss. "And you, Mr. Tucker, more than I ever thought possible." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for saying yes to the cabin, to staying, to becoming my wife." "Thank you for asking," she said simply. "For seeing past my fear to who I could be." Later, when the guests had departed and the ranch was quiet once more, Caleb carried Sarah across the threshold of the main house, their home now, truly and officially. In their bedroom, candles had been lit, the bed turned down, everything prepared for their first night as husband and wife. With infinite tenderness, they discovered each other fully at last, their connection deepening with every touch, every whispered word of love. In Caleb's arms, Sarah found a passion she had never known was possible, a joining of bodies that reflected the union of their hearts. Afterward, lying in the circle of her husband's embrace, Sarah watched the moonlight streaming through the window and offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, even the painful parts, for they had led her to this moment of perfect contentment. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Sarah turned to face him, memorizing every beloved feature of his face in the gentle light. "I'm thinking that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings." "Not an ending," he corrected, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "A beginning," Sarah smiled, settling more comfortably against him. "You're right, the best kind of beginning." Outside, the night was peaceful, stars scattered across the vast Colorado sky. On the hillside, the oak tree stood sentinel over the ranch, the place where Sarah had finally found her home, her safety, her love. The place where her heart, once broken, had been made whole again. Not by time alone, but by the kindness of a cowboy who had discovered her sleeping in church pews and offered his home instead of judgment. By a love that had seen her true worth when she had forgotten it herself. By the second chance she had been brave enough to take.